here just how massive some of these root balls can get on the trees and why they would hold back so much sediment when you have sort of a bunch of shrubs woven together, kind of creating a framework to hold that bank back. So my project that I've been working on across 4 counties in central Pennsylvania is called Precision Conservation, using high-resolution data to identify where we can install forest riparian buffers to get the greatest benefit to water quality and wildlife. And this was funded through a seed grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and we applied for the grant in conjunction with a number of partners working locally, including Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and then we have 2 university partners, Bloomsburg University and Susquehanna University. So I'll talk a little bit about the involvement of the universities in a couple minutes. And in case you were wondering, I'm actually our only Pennsylvania employee. I didn't mention this at the beginning. And my office is housed locally here at Susquehanna University. So that's sort of my connection to this area. In terms of using technology and conservation, sort of what put the Chesapeake Conservancy on the map was creating what we call high-resolution land cover. So depicting what's actually happening across the Earth's surface and translating it into something that you can do math on. So up here, starting in the top left, you can actually see these are pictures taken from airplanes. It's called aerial photography. And so you have airplanes flying over the Earth's surface taking pictures. We can take those photos and actually convert them into, it's millions of pixels that are represented there, and each pixel tells you what you're covering on the land surface at that specific point. So here I have the aerial imagery and resulting land cover for a White House that you might be actually pretty familiar with in DC. So here you can see the red on this infographic is showing structures. So those are all buildings. We have sidewalks and other impervious surfaces in gray, individual trees as well as other tree canopy in the dark green, and then the light green is low vegetation like grass. And so to really emphasize why this is important, this is previously existing data that we used for planning. It's called the National Land Cover Dataset, and it's got a resolution of 30 meters by 30 meters. That's pretty big pixel size. That's like 90 feet by 90 feet. Okay, so you're trying to depict what's happening across the landscape, but if you have a building in that 90 feet by 90 feet, you might not even pick that up. So when you look at this compared to our high resolution data, you can see why you get a lot bigger of a planning benefit from having this high resolution data available. And this is actually something we created. It's free for any different organizations. Like this is used by a lot of planning districts and that sort of stuff. But it's really helpful for identifying where trees are present or not present along our streams. You couldn't really do that with this previously available data. What's really important about this is looking at that land-water interface and what's going on in the near stream area. So I'm going to walk you through sort of how we map where trees are present along streams and where they're missing. Like where could we actually plant trees? So here, starting in this image, we're mapping the water network. So the first thing we need to do is identify where the stream meets the land and then what's going on in that near stream area. So we start with our water network and we lay on that meter resolution land cover. And we're going to clip that to the near stream 35 feet. 35 feet is your standard width of a forest riparian buffer. That's what we want everything to, the desired, outcome here is to have stream-side forests along the entire length of stream, because they're really good at filtering upslope nutrients and sediment. So we're clipping the land cover to that 35 feet, and then here what we've identified are the opportunities where we can install forest riparian buffers. And we can really think of forest riparian buffers as sort of the last line of defense. Here I've delineated, one cool thing that you can do with our mapping is delineate drainage areas coming into those places where you can install buffers to quantify impact. So here is the entire drainage area coming into this place where you could plant a buffer. So we could tell you how many acres of upslope agriculture, turf, or impervious surface would actually be filtered through that buffer planting. And so we've actually created sort of a parcel scale prioritization of this, for the 4 counties that I work in. And we've sort of started with saying this was a prioritization for just forest riparian buffers, but we've sort of moved away from that and said that the entire parcel is a priority. Forest riparian buffers are one management practice that you might recommend there, but depending on what's going on in that upslope land area, you might also need other best management practices, like cover crops or using no-till. And we let that up to the conservation professionals that are actually working with landowners. This is just sort of to identify where you want to be working. And so how do you actually prioritize where to work? This is, when I came into this job in 2016, this was pretty much my mission, was to figure out how you actually do this. We hosted a number of workshops, engaging over 40 different organizations across that 4-county region, trying to figure out how do you actually map where pollution is coming from. And so the Department of Environmental Protection actually has these data sets called the Impaired Streams of Pennsylvania. And so they actually look at the in-stream bug community and can tell how healthy a stream is. So they mark some of them for impairment, and they'll label it for what it's impaired for, like some of them are labeled impaired for agriculture, or they can be impaired for acid mine drainage. We took that data set and looked at just the agricultural impairments, and then tried to look upstream and upslope of those areas to try to figure out where that pollution is actually coming from. Because if you can figure out where it's coming from, then you can try to address those issues. And so what we did here was created a parcel scale prioritization, identifying where buffers or other management practices could be put into place to actually address water quality issues and make sort of big gains, trying to delist these streams, pull them off the impaired streams list. So here you can see, this is a project I've actually been working on with an Amish landowner out in Center County. You can see his barnyard is located about 20 feet from the stream. And so we've been working with him to try to implement barnyard management practices, stream bank fencing, and a forest riparian buffer. But this is just sort of an example of the types of places that we've been working as a result of the project. So that was sort of phase 1. And the question came out of this. We presented the prioritization to our conservation partners. And the first question that somebody asked was, they said, this is wonderful. It's great to know where the issues are. How do we actually talk to landowners about this? Conservation to this point has really been a landowner-driven system. The landowner approaches the conservation people about doing a project. It really doesn't work the opposite way. And so how can you sort of re-engineer that system? And so we created this landowner outreach tool called Restoration Reports, and we've been trying it out at different outreach events. We've taken it to the Grange Fair, Ag Progress Days, and a number of county fairs. And so essentially how this works is a landowner comes up to our table and we'll print a report for them that's specific to their parcel. So they come up and they tell us they give us their address for the parcel, and they tell us what their areas of interest are. Is it agricultural production, wildlife, or recreation? And so we find the parcel. Here I showed a highlight of one of them. And then it generates a 6-page parcel-specific report. It gives them a map of their property, showing them how many acres of forest riparian buffer they could install. It tells them the impact it would have by installing a buffer on their property. And then it also gives a lot of parcel-specific information as to why they might actually want to do a project. If they install a buffer, could it benefit bird species like the American woodcock or the cerulean warbler? Is their parcel located within half a mile of a designated trout stream, for example? So a lot of just parcel-specific pieces that might engage them in doing a project. And then one really cool thing we did at the end is generated a list of the right conservation professionals for that person to work with. And this is actually based on the mapping analysis. So how many acres of buffer potential do they have? For example, this is Frank Rohr. He administers